Shall we move onwards then to Tenet?
Yes.
Shall we? Oh, the film that I thought was supposed to be the saviour of cinema, guys. Good grief. Will they please make up their minds? It's unlikely that Tenet, the latest from director Christopher Nolan, will have crept onto your radar undetected, and about equally as unlikely that you will need me to fill you in on the controversy surrounding its self-evangelising status as the supposed saviour of cinema. We'll leave it to Tenet and Unhinged to sort it out amongst themselves. Let them work it out. I'll leave my opinions on this for the conclusion of my review, but for now, all you need to know is that Nolan has once again thrown a dart at a random back issue of New Scientist and used whatever phrasing it pierced as the scaffold for an action thriller with espionage overtones. In this instance, the protagonist, known cleverly as the protagonist, John David Washington, finds himself subject to a technology called inversion, which is being used to send objects, information, and ultimately people backwards in time from somewhere in the future. These antagonists to be, who we are told exist at a point in time subject to irreversible environmental catastrophe, are using Russian billionaire Andrei Sator, Ken Branagh, as a vessel for their machinations, which involve the assembly of a physical algorithm sent from the future to reverse the flow of time, bulldozing our past to make way for their future. Confused? I have bad news for you. You still have Nolan's trademark purposeful obfuscation of dialogue to contend with. The concept itself is simple enough. An object's direction of travel through time can be reversed by placing it in a revolving room known as a turnstile, whereupon hilarity may ensue, as fights, car chases, and angry conversations take place between people and objects moving in opposite temporal directions. The problem, common to pretty much any movie plot incorporating time travel, is that it only makes sense so long as it is narratively convenient, and not so much the second you stop to think about any of it. But, as Clements Posey's massively underused scientist suggests, it's better if you don't try to understand it. Just feel it. At 2.5 hours long, Tenet could probably do with reversing some of its own flow of time. But in actual fact, I never found myself particularly bored. Admittedly, a lot of that time passed playing games of guess what the person mumbling beneath a gas mask in front of a jet engine just said. But even on a second viewing, where I picked up the loose plot ends and turned the subtitles on, I still found things zipped along nicely, and I'd suggest this may actually be one of Nolan's best in terms of pacing. Unfortunately, a lot of the director's established issues persist. If you want emotional involvement for your $200 million, then sorry, but you need to continue to look elsewhere. And if you're expecting female characters to be much more than damsels in distress, then, again, sorry, you're right out of luck. Once again, Nolan also manages to insert himself into his movie, this time in the form of foppish dandy Neil, Robert Pattinson, who appears with increasing frequency as the protagonist's apparent handler, and a convenient mouthpiece for exposition who can get any confused audience members back up to speed ahead of the next set piece. On this occasion, our Nolan analogue gets a pass because I've grown increasingly fond of Pattinson and he's a good deal of fun in this, and I find myself actually looking forward to the next Batman movie, so that's something I took from it. But that's by the by. Is Tenet any good? Certainly I found it enjoyable enough to pass the time, but I don't know that I'm going to add it to my collection anytime soon. After a second viewing, where the nuances of his performance became more obvious, my biggest takeaway was actually John David Washington. I know people keep saying they'd love to see Nolan do a Bond movie. Personally, I think that's one of the worst ideas in the history of bad ideas. I would, however, love to see Washington do a Bond movie, specifically as Bond, and I can't believe that's not something I'm hearing anyone else mention in the wake of all this. But never mind. Tenet, it's all right.
I see him as Bond.
Yeah, that's not a bad shout. So I can't think of too many other people around to be.
People aren't. Can I just say, people aren't having the conversation because he's American, and that is the only reason. And that is a pretty stupid reason.
Yeah.
Had you seen him in anything before, Craig?
No, this is the first I've actually seen John David Washington.
You really should check out Black Klansman.
Yeah, I know Black Klansman's on the watch list, but
really
I watched him move through this film, and that sort of suave but dispassionate removal from events, and especially that sort of casual fight through the kitchen in the restaurant near the start.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And immediately I was like, oh, yeah, I know everybody's talking about Idris Elba. That's
Bond, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a no-go, but this guy could be Bond.
Can I just ask how you managed to say with a straight face, physical algorithm?
I googled physical algorithm because I said to myself, that's not a thing. And there are papers talking about physical algorithms, but they seem to be papers that Nolan's come across and then not read past the first paragraph, which I don't think is anything he's ever done with one of his concepts before anyway. He usually just gets people like Kip Thorne to nod and say, "That's great, Chris." So yeah, physical algorithm. Or basically bad lollipop. Would that be better?
I do like to have my science fiction based on something at least vaguely scientific, and like physical algorithm, and we're going to reverse the entropy. Like, no, that doesn't make it. What you just stuck some words together there and hope that people would think it meant something.
There's something in this film it's about 20 minutes, and I think can't be more than that. And the two scenes, they're not quite back to back, that kind of informed my thinking for the rest of the film, which is you start off, you give it the setups, like, oh, here we're reversing entropy, these things, we don't understand them, there's not that many, they're all kicking around here, we're not quite sure what it is, yada, yada, yada. And then it's not quite the next scene, but it's the scene after, I think, where, having established all this is quite rare, we don't know what's going on, they have exactly the kind of bizarre reverse time-travelling bungee jumping cord they need to get up to a balcony. It's like, okay, so you're a stupid film then. You're Fast and the Furious, but maybe a little bit less insulting. And that was the kind of level I viewed the rest of the film. And on that basis, I enjoyed it well enough. It had lots of nice things that exploded and car chases that were all crazy and all that stuff. And I couldn't really think of it much more than that, and that's maybe doing it a bit of a disservice, because I don't think it is quite that bad. But clearly Tenet's the sort of film where Nolan's wanting you to sit there with a pen and paper and do like time loops and all this kind of stuff and try and work out what's going where. And I am very glad I didn't see this in a cinema, because while I'm sure it would be spectacularly visually enhanced, the audio would be absolutely ruined by a screen full of people trying to explain to each other what the hell's going on, particularly given, like as you say, everyone's mumbling, and in terms of engaging an audience, I question the wisdom of putting everyone in bulky protective gear that makes it very difficult to identify who's on screen at any time in a film that's already very deliberately obscuring who's who, what's what, how's that, and when's when. So, yes, ultimately, I enjoyed it by simply switching my brain off and watching the pretty things explode. But I struggle to give it much more credit than that. It's a very expensive, shiny toy, which I enjoyed watching well enough. I think for 2.5 hours, it battered through it well enough. But yeah, it is by no means a masterpiece of anything.
I also think the sound mix would be ruined by the fact that the sound ruined by the terrible sound mix. Like, you can't hear anything. It's like, even a scene in a restaurant, like, what are they saying? What? Hello? Because there's some music beds and everybody's just saying like this. And tiny important plot points. Like, what?
There's balls down your throat.
Yeah. I did enjoy it because it barrels along and doesn't really give you time to think, which is good, because if you do, it's not good. Clemence Poesi's character, as you say, Craig, completely underused. But she says, right, these are inverted. Okay, I'm not quite sure what this film means, but it doesn't work particularly well. But okay, these are inverted, and then
it doesn't work full stop.
Yeah, once we knew what to look for, we kept finding them everywhere. Then you suddenly see that he's in this archive full of drawers of inverted stuff. It all looks the same. You haven't explained at all what to look for. What do you mean by we knew what to look for? Is that relevant? Apparently not. But you thought, and so it's full of stuff like that. And then
that's what I thought after that scene. It's finally a film. There's the crossover I've always wanted for. That scene in Austin Powers where he gets confused about time travel, and a crossover between that and Inspector Gadget, where they just pull out whatever they need whenever they need it.
I suggest you don't think about it much too. They've literally lifted that out of Austin Powers. Yeah.
And then it's one of the worst things too is, like, if you think about it, you'll think about the dialogue. You really don't want to think about the dialogue. I mean, it's not the worst I've heard, but it's so ordinary. And your character's saying really stupid things too, like Elizabeth Debicki's character. She's lying, and Neil, Robert Pattinson, who Craig I also am beginning to really like now, particularly after The Lighthouse, I think, although maybe a wee bit before that as well.
Yeah.
And he's explained to her what's happening, and like this singularity thing. Another thing, which it's not quite singularity, but with this algorithm going to destroy stuff. Like, why did they think that would work, and why did somebody else want them to do? No, so I'm going to stop. I'll be here all night. But
no, that's the least of the worries.
Yeah, but so he explains that and says, like, basically, when this happens, everybody dies, the whole world dies, basically existence stops, right? And then her character says, even my son. No.
No, he's exempt from the laws of physics.
Everybody will cease to exist except your kid, who will be fine. That's it. Your mind. Like, that's just, and that's
albeit alone in the infinite void, but he'll be there. He'll be fine.
It's full of dialogue like that. It's just like either really dumb or just incredibly ordinary stuff. It's like, this is a professional screenwriter, really?
To me, the dialogue's way down the list of concerns. Do you know what's one of my chief concerns, Drew? Is you'll notice you've just mentioned Elizabeth Debicki. Now, you will notice that in my recap of the plot, I certainly didn't mention her. She's one of the main characters. It's not necessary for me to even mention her to summarise the plot for you. So that tells you everything you need to know about how important her character is. And I would disagree with something that Scott said, that Christopher Nolan wants you to congratulate him and sort of sit down and draw lines between points and stuff to figure it all out. I don't think he wants you to do that at all, because the minute you do that, it patently doesn't work. Yes. Christopher Nolan wants to hit you with enough stuff that you sit back and you go, my God, he's smart. No, he's not.
You're never supposed to stop and think. You're supposed to just keep going. So you never have a chance to think.
He's really not. I also want to know which part of this film really needed to be shot on IMAX. He's obsessed with IMAX, and for no particularly good reason. I was going to
mention exactly that. Thank you, because I formed my head like.
I also don't think any of the set pieces are particularly spectacular. I was supposed to have my jaw dropped by them crashing a 747 into what is clearly a plywood extension built onto an existing terminal building.
That was a spectacularly underwhelming stunt. He's done stuff with planes before. Stripping the plane in midair in The Dark Knight Rises. That was an incredible stunt. Yeah. And this one, there's plane ran into the side of a clear. Yeah, it's just a clear extension. It's very obviously an extension.
His commitment to physical, practical effects work is commendable, but he uses it to the point of obsession. He's got no appreciation whatsoever of the notion that it should be used when appropriate, and that there's nothing wrong with other effects work elsewhere, because ultimately a lot of the time it can be to the detriment, and it actually ends up being incredibly underwhelming.
Yeah, talking about underwhelming, the end of Dunkirk, Scott and I both had the same issue. I don't remember if you did, Craig, but because he was so determined to use only practical effects when the one thing that CGI is unequivocally good at is scale. Yeah. It's like, apparently the Dunkirk evacuation was performed by 4 boats and a dinghy.
Yeah, and there were 20 people on the beach waiting to leave. I think it's commendable, but again, it's as with anything else in filmmaking, it's a tool that needs to be deployed at the right moment and the right time to the right effect. And I honestly think, it's not enough that he is committed to using that consistently. He has demonstrated time and time again that he doesn't know when it shouldn't be applied, and that's a big problem for me. I actually don't think this is all that spectacular a movie. There wasn't any part of it which blew me away.
Yeah, it's fine. That's it.
It's absolutely fine.
That film was fine. I enjoyed it, and it was fine, but nothing better.
Here's the annoying thing as well, is that there could have been pretty awesome moments, because they take great pains at one point, at the point at which the protagonist makes the decision they're going to invert and go back after that car chase scene, at the point at which the movie essentially flips over and if it actually kind of plays out backwards, which I think he wants us to be really congratulatory about as well, that essentially there's a point in the middle of the film where it mirrors and it kind of starts playing backwards, essentially.
Craig, this will blow your mind. Tenet's a palindrome.
Oh, my days.
It's such a clever name, isn't it?
Sator, Rotas, what? There's a point there where the protagonist gets briefed by the female soldier whose name escapes me because she's a woman, so she's not important. And she talks about all these things, terrible things that could happen if you do certain stuff. And you think to yourself, oh, this is going to be cool. There's going to be some really interesting stuff we're going to get to see here when these rules get broken. They never do. They don't apply at all. There's no concern whatsoever. He's in no way concerned when he goes back to fight himself, that he's been told that, God forbid that you should actually come into contact with yourself. He's never concerned at any point that the other him that he's fighting, that a glove might come off and you might accidentally touch the hand or something and all the rough and tumble. There's none of that. There's never any threat that anyone's going to get spectacularly annihilated on screen because they've broken the rules. None of that plays out. It's just pretty pedestrian for the most part. Yeah, and the climactic.
Even when they've mentioned earlier that it's basically like matter and antimatter colliding.
Yeah.
which
exactly.
Like a lot of energy and annihilation.
Yeah, I'm like, that's going to be cool. Never happens. The climactic battle is very cool in concept, and to my mind, that could have lent itself to really quite spectacular. There's one part of that which is quite cool, and the rest of it is really just a mess. And bless, is it Ludwig Göransson? I've just butchered him, the composer. Oh no, he's done a pretty good job with the score, because there are actually more cues in the score as to what's happening on screen, and it's really crucial in that sequence that you have the musical cues of the music playing backwards any time that blue team is on screen, to keep track of what's happening. But really, it wasn't until I've seen this film 3 times now, and again, it never felt like 2.5 hours. So on some level, I must have been enjoying it, but that final battle still doesn't 100% make sense to me after 3 viewings.
It still feels like a wasted opportunity too. It could have been so much interesting stuff done there. It was like, all the people look the same because they're all wearing masks, and they don't really. This building kind of goes back up and falls down slightly, but okay, meh.
Yeah. Like a building getting blown up from 2 directions in time. That was quite cool for a moment, and then it's, well, that's past now. It's just people
running
and shooting at each other, and sometimes smoke's getting sucked into the ground where a bomb's gone off traveling. But and it just never. The only real satisfaction for me came with the revelation of Neil's nature towards the end, and that was quite satisfying because of the way that Pattinson plays it actually, and you realise the nobility of what he's actually doing. And the reason why Pattinson can sort of just be on hand at a moment's notice when you need him earlier in the movie. He just seems to be everywhere, and can arrange stuff. So, but for me, I think the biggest thing about Tenet is understanding the sheer hubris, the sheer ego of Christopher Nolan in leveraging his relationship with Warner Brothers and insisting this got released into cinemas and encouraging people to head out to a cinema,
don't get me started
putting themselves at danger in the middle of a global fucking pandemic.
Yes, read the goddamned Room.
Yes, and let's be clear about that. That was not Warner Brothers' decision. That was Christopher Nolan leveraging his contractual commitments with Warner Brothers to insist that is what happened. Christopher Nolan thinks his popular science woo-woo bullshit plot and his spectacular flat IMAX cinematography and his underwhelming practical effects work is enough to convince people to go out and kill themselves and others in order to see it in a cinema. And I will never forgive that man for that. And I've listened recently to some podcasts that have spoken about comments that he's made online recently about the decision of Warner to move all of their content to HBO in future. I really despise Christopher Nolan now, and there was no way I was ever going to watch this movie in the cinema. Why, in the middle of a pandemic, you would not give people the choice to watch your movie safely, to assume that your movie was some sort of artistic behemoth that just simply could not be appreciated if it was not seen in a badly spec'd, badly calibrated cinema, as opposed to at home on halfway decent equipment, where I had a great experience and I could go and make a cup of tea when I wanted, and I didn't have to worry about stuff like dying and or killing other people. I just find his behaviour and his attitude has been so far removed from reality that I am disgusted with him. Yeah. And I make a pledge now never to pay to go to the cinema to see another Christopher Nolan movie again. So you, Christopher Nolan, and also Warner Brothers for not having had the guts to pull him up to rank on that.
Look, I mean, I on a level, I get it. We all love cinema around here. It's why we're doing this podcast. But and no one wants to see it go away. There's a very real chance that might happen. Obviously, this is going extending. There's a lot of implications. I can see why, particularly the whole Warner Brothers thing and the HBO deal. I can see why it would raise concerns, but again, read The Room. We're in the middle of a deadly pandemic where people are going to be sitting, well, as you want it, in rooms, breathing the same air as other people. It is obviously never going to be COVID secure, as we'd hoped that it might be at some point. So just get over yourselves. God damn it, him and all the rest of these
twat of a man.
I mean, I understand wanting other people to see it in cinema, but just can you just wind your neck in for a minute? Get some idea about gravity. It's very annoying, him and some of the rest of the ones that were affected by the kind of HBO decision. And I agree, Warner Brothers could perhaps have done that a bit more amicably on
They could have gone
end,
about it in a slightly better way, but yeah. They're right and you're wrong.
Yes, there's not really any argumentation in that one, is there? It's just pretty obvious, and they all look a bit silly trying to say anything otherwise.
He's betrayed himself there with his behaviour around this whole thing, and I'm not just saying it for effect. That is disgusting enough to me that he insisted this go into cinemas where he knew people would be compelled, and you can place the blame on the people who simply felt that they would have had to have gone and not having had the not having been able to resist under the circumstances. I think they are also equally stupid people, but I think his decision as a filmmaker to insist on that, I genuinely will never forgive him for that. He has literally put people's lives at risk. People will have died because of Christopher Nolan's decision that this had to be shown in cinemas when it was, and I don't understand. I can't imagine a time and place where I will ever forgive him for that, and I will never pay to see another one of his movies in the cinema. So that's that. I just think it's disgusting. And it's a shame, because it's not a terrible film. It's all right. It's entertaining. But
I just want to move back to the film itself rather than talking about Christopher Nolan's terrible arrogance, because I'm just going to get angry. And I'm fed up of being angry, Craig.
Going backwards in time, how appropriate.
Yes, indeed. Just to pick up on your point about the IMAX thing and which sections you chose to do in IMAX too, there's a number of points to this I thought. I know he loves IMAX, and you could use that scale and the larger frame to have a particularly different look about things. And what you've chosen to do is to have a couple of people sitting in a car. Well, that was worth the time. Well done. And there's the kind of
totally see that in the biggest screen available
as well. Yeah. There
was a nice car, Drew. I don't know that I could have appreciated the interior spec quite as well if I hadn't seen it on the biggest screen available.
It's so full of just kind of, it's very ordinary shots there. It kind of matches the terribly ordinary dialogue too. One other thing, brief of bit of something I wanted to mention though, is because it's a bugbear of mine in films like this when like characters don't act professionally. Let's take a character like somebody like a John McClane, right? Who ends up in a situation he has to become the hero, and maybe he doesn't make the difficult choice of like you can't sacrifice one person's life for hundreds of thousands or something. And you can buy that character doing that because that's a very difficult thing to do. But when your character is a trained CIA hitman and decides that he's going to sacrifice the entire universe for some woman who he doesn't know, we're expected to think he's in love with, but they have no chemistry whatsoever.
It just hasn't been established at all.
It's so offensive. I hate that so much when you have like somebody who's a professional and it's like, I'm just going to let everybody in the world die now because this woman might get shot.
Well, and for exactly the same reason as well, though, Drew, her decision to, I can't skip ahead 30 seconds if you haven't seen the movie, yes. But yeah, skip ahead 30 seconds if you haven't seen the movie. So her decision to shoot Sator because, quote, I couldn't bear to let him die thinking that he'd won. Well, the stakes are everyone else dying.
Yeah,
so I don't really care about your selfish motivation and your personal satisfaction, love.
Yeah, at least though with her, she's just this person who's been emotionally abused by this guy.
She's been driven by emotion.
Somewhat more understandable, but when it's John David Washington's character, he's this professional. I hate that so much.
Yeah.
Just in contrast to this film did have a welcome return of one of my favourite supporting character archetypes, which is like the hyper-competent support team leader who gives the impression that they're most likely in an equally entertaining movie somewhere else.
Can I just say as well, was Aaron Taylor Johnson drunk when he was filming this? Because I swear he slurred certain words I don't know if he was just wrestling with trying to sound like a proper Cockney or whatever, but there were certain points, especially in that briefing before the temporal pincer movement, that he just wasn't pronouncing words properly. And I'm like, you're English, those words are English. Why are you struggling with this, Aaron Taylor Johnson? And I'm honest to God, I think he was drinking.
I didn't really notice that.
I didn't notice, but it's not the sort of film where you would notice dialogue being a bit difficult to understand, really. So,
No, exactly.
Because the sound mix has done most of that work for you.
Yeah.
That's why you can't understand it, because it's so badly mixed.
Why do you think he continues to do that? Because he knows by now what people's opinions of that are. Nobody enjoys his sound mix except the fanboys who would tell you that every film he makes is the best thing since sliced bread anyway, because they've no imagination. And certainly they can't imagine a Spielberg film without the heart, clearly. So why is it you think...
no nuance either. It's like you can like one thing about a person's film and not like other stuff.
Exactly.
I'll give him a pass with Bane. It made sense for that guy to be a bit mumbly because, well, he's got the mask on. Everyone else, maybe not so much. Maybe just try talking properly. But there's a thing. They
even conceded, though, with the mix on the home releases of that stuff.
That's true. To make it, even at the cinema, because I think if you went back and see like the first trailers, Bane was... when and all of a sudden he was actually properly not so bad. You could actually hear what he was saying in the film, but still.
Yeah. So he himself has conceded to the fact that, okay, I get it, these sound mixes aren't doing anyone, but then he keeps doing it with every new film.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know.
Could it be that he's a monumental prick?
No, it's the audience that are wrong.
How disappointed I was by Kenneth Branagh, because he was a lot more fun doing his silly Russian accent in Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit than he was here.
I think he was the only one having fun in this movie.
It's much more fun as a Russian in Jack Ryan, though.
Yeah, well, this may be an unpopular opinion, but both my wife and I said that actually we bought him as being quite convincingly dangerous. But then I know other people who have just laughed outright at his performance. So
I couldn't believe there was a second. Well, there's something about the eyes, and again that worked in Jack Ryan. But he was having more fun with it in Jack Ryan, and the accent was funnier.
Yeah.
This is like his diet comedy accent, but I still enjoyed it. Just I know, apropos of nothing, according to Wikipedia, at least as of a couple of days ago, Kenneth Branagh as Andrei Sator, a Russian oligarch who communes with the future, which I thought was a nice turn of phrase.
Wish I'd thought of that. Communes with the future. Good grief. We still got one film left to talk about, haven't we?
We do. Well, I'll do that.
Yes.
We probably should stop talking about this, because as much as I thought it was enjoyable, it's just making us all angry.
Shall we move on to
you in particular, the one who's seen it most often?
Yes. Funny how it's having that effect.